Good morning, welcome back. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. I'm going to do this video in a whole different kind of format. First thing I'm going to do is show you an extreme rock crawling trail I was on about 8-9 months ago last summer, which was one of my inspirations for the new project. My thought. I'm going to try it. Traffic jam. looking at that trail, you may have guessed what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do a buggy build, which is totally different than what I normally do on my channel with old resto rust and things like that. But this build will have something for everyone that wants to know how to build something, because you have to build every aspect of this car. I'm going to start with a tube chassis. I'm going to use custom built axles. I'm going to use a custom transmission, an engine, a transfer. Everything on this is going to be thought of and why I thought of it that way. I'm hoping to build a buggy that is well thought out enough that it will do what I want it to do. What is it I want it to do? I want it to be a extremely capable trail buggy. Watching that video, you probably noticed that I don't have a rear steer axle, and the ones that were successfully climbing all of the obstacles were rear steer vehicles. Now, they were tube chassis buggies for the most part. There were a couple of us that were not tube buggies, but we were still drag axle, which means there's no steering component to the rear axle. This trail was my inspiration to go to the next level. Now, tube chassis buggies have been around for a long time. They're cool, but you can't carry much in them. They're not as practical for other trails. But my Jeep is so capable, and I know how to drive it. I mean, I've been running that rig for 16, 17 years now. Up until a few years ago, when the technology was really getting good on these rear steer buggies, I was able to keep up with the regular drag axle buggy. So I always figured, why waste the money until it's something that really inspires me to do it. That trail I showed you on the beginning of this, and one other trail I showed you, were my inspiration to go rear steer. So at that point, I started looking into what it takes to make a rear steer axle. And I thought I would just put a rear steer in that Jeep and it would still be very capable. And, you know, lo and behold, by the time you buy the housing, buy the knuckles, buy all the stuff that really makes it a good heavy-duty rear steer axle, you're going to have $15,000 to $20,000 out of pocket in that, and you still have to put it together. In the meantime, while I was doing that research, I stumbled upon a buddy of mine who lives way in the deep southeast coast, posted a set of built axles. And I say built, they are they've got carriers and axle shafts in them and knuckles. They do not have all the links and everything else. You're going to have to do those depending on the buggy. But he had posted this 14-bolt rear steer axle along with a Dana 60 steer axle for a superior price, I must say. I went ahead and bought them. And I bought these axles. One of the reasons is they're heavy duty, but he was on his way from there to Utah to do some four-wheeling and could drop them off. So that made life good for me. I didn't have to go try to figure out how to get, you know, a couple thousand pounds of axles palleted out here. Now, he was going to use these axles for one of his builds, but then he decided to change direction, and he's leaning more into the comp buggy, and these really aren't the ideal axles for doing a comp buggy. These are a real good axle for doing a good heavy-duty trail. So this was the first component to the can of worms I have now opened. Now, just a quick introduction to this rear axle. It was built as a loaded axle, which means it's got carrier axle shafts, knuckles, hubs, but it does not have any link mounts. All of the link mounts, trusses, steering components will have to be added. So there's still a ton of work to be done to this axle to make it functioning. The feature of this axle, it's a 14-bolt new style center section. The tubes are 1/2 inch thick, 3.5 inch DOM tubing. The knuckles are Spider-Trax knuckles, which are, I've never used them personally, but these are supposed to be the tough things on the market today. Now, this particular axle does have an ARB in the carrier. I'm going to leave it there. If I blow it up, I'll then put a spool in it. I will open this up and verify the gears in it. Next on the component list, we'll mosey over here. This is a high pinion Dana 60 passenger drop. Now I've got it kind of flipped, so the passenger drop means it's a passenger side differential, so that's a little different than a lot of them do. Again, this one has an ARB, it's got the Spider Track knuckles, high steer, and it is a loaded differential, meaning there are no link mounts or steering mounts or trusses on it. I will say they just tack welded the knuckles on at this point because I may have to rotate those depending on the caster and the geometry I choose to use on it. Now, I've been collecting parts for this project for 9-10 months now, keeping my eye out on the local marketplace type places and figuring out some components I'm going to need. So we've started with axles. Now let's talk powertrain. Powertrain wise, a lot of you probably have seen this in the shop as I've been tripping over it. I have one of those. It's a 5.3 liter iron block engine. You can tell by the intake it's a truck engine. I will have to change the intake manifold to the lower profile Camaro style. I will also have to change the oil pan to like an F-body or a Camaro style oil pan. Now, I would like to have an aluminum block, and if I stumble on an aluminum block at the right price, we'll aluminum block this thing, but otherwise an iron block will work just fine. Downstream in the driveline, I have a Turbo 400. Now this Turbo 400 I've just parked under here for now. I am going to do a complete video on the process of this Turbo 400. I like the Turbo 400. They're strong, they're a little bigger, they're a little heavier, but for instance in my black Jeep, the Turbo 400, and that is now 17 years old since I went through it. So they'll last. Got some other components that I've been collecting. For instance, these are the 1.25" Heim joints that I'm going to be using. They are overkill. You don't need them this big, but that's how I like them. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to give these a shot. I usually either get CTM or Yukon, but Revolution now has a brass bushing chromoly Dana 60U joint, so I'm going to give these a shot. They're supposed to be every bit as strong as the CTMs and Yukons, and they're about half the price, so huge win there. Now, the key component to a tube chassis buggy is going to be the tube chassis, right? So you can see behind me, I've got a tube chassis sitting here. Now, you know I've been doing a build out for a friend of mine on that other buggy, and I've had a couple little videos, and I'm going to go over more on that one too, because it's a totally different brand than what I did. Now, when you're looking at tube chassis buggies, I really had a hard time deciding what I wanted to do because I can build it myself. My biggest issue with that is I am so OCD about this and this have to be exactly equal. And when you're in a home shop, you've got a tube bender and you're using a tape measure, you can do it all in your own shop, but getting the precision down is really, really tough. Most of the chassis builders anymore, they've got all of this geometry and all of the engineering set up on a CAD program. And they'll send that CAD program, or they will have the machine to do it, where that CAD talks to the machine, you stick a piece of tube in one end, and it comes out looking like a silly straw in the other. They have laser cutting bevels and witness marks that go into them, so they become very, very precise. Also, a lot of these chassis builders will have a jig to make sure it's all square. So between the precision and how much time I would take to build a tube chassis, I decided that wasn't the way I was going to go. Aside from that, I'd probably have a pile of tube about this tall of, oops, mistakes I've made, and I'll have to use those pieces of tube for something else because I don't want to waste anything. Now, my other option was buying a chassis that someone else has started, a project that they lost interest in, something like that, and then finish it out and go build it. Option 3 was just find a used buggy because you can get them cheaper, then you can build them yourself, and I will put a big flag on that. Yes, you can buy one cheaper than you can build one. You'll never get your money out of it if that's what you're looking for when you build your own buggy. And my last option on this project was to start researching chassis builders and figure out whose I liked, why I liked it, what I didn't like, and who I wanted to deal with it. As I started researching some of these chassis builders, because to me that was going to be my best avenue to go, because it's new, I can put everything on it the way I want it. I'm going to pay more in the long run, but that's okay, I don't care. At least on the chassis part of it. The assembly and all the drivetrain and everything else, since I do all that myself anyway, I'm going to be half the price if you did a turnkey. So when I say turnkey, that means you just pay someone and they ship you a new buggy. But doing my research on these chassis builders, I got it down to about 4 builders that I really liked their product. They were reasonably priced, and the buggies, first of all, functioned well. I ended up talking to the guy in Arizona. I told him the things I liked about his buggy, and I told him the things that I didn't like about his buggy, and asked him just flat out, would you be willing to change these in the CAD? And at that point, he said, sure. Now I'm going to fast forward about 5 months, and the chassis builder sent me this picture. You can see in this picture, it has an angry eyebrow on the front windshield bar. Now, that angry eyebrow comes down as such, and it's a real popular look. A lot of people really like that look on their buggies. Unfortunately, I'm not one of them. So one of the modifications I asked him to make, and it would have been really easy to make that modification in the CAD before it went out and cut up a bunch of tube, was a straight bar across there. Now, when that bar is straight and not in an angry eyebrow, those 2 windshield bars coming up also have to be a little longer, which that's the way it is. But I called him up, told him that's not my chassis, it's got an angry eyebrow. He thought it was going to be a cool design that I would really like, and it's not an angry eyebrow. And just because I don't want an angry eyebrow doesn't mean I want that either. So that was his own artistic decision there. I don't like it. So I didn't like it enough to where I hauled it home, sat it here in the shop for a couple of days, and I'd come out and look at it and decide, do I want to live with this or not? Now, on his production chassis, the welding's beautiful, the chassis is square as can be. It is a good base to start from. After some very hard internal debate on it, I am going to cut that bar out. To me, this particular tube looks like cow horns. So I'll be making a lot of modifications on this chassis before I ever bolt anything I own to it or even make it into a rolling chassis. So I'm going to start with the thing that bothers me the most. Get the Sawzall out. I'll start with cutting the excess metal off with the friction wheel, then I'll go to a grinder. One down. Just so I know where to cut that center crotch bar, I just put a broomstick across it that is exactly parallel with the rear horizontal bar. And then I'm just going to chop that and get it at least in the ballpark of the new bar. And there you go. I'm ready for a new chunk of tube. crossbars in, top's welded. I'll flip it upside down to weld the other side, mostly because I want to make sure I get good penetration on the 3 pipes connecting there. Next, get some support there. That's the straight bar I prefer. Now, I ground down a little bit in here because I came up with a kind of a cool idea. So I always like putting rear view mirror in. So I got a little bit of air gap, cut a piece of 1 3/4 inch, slaved it over with that gap. Now I can run a drill and a tap thread through for a rear view mirror. It's hard trying to match or get similar welds to someone else because they have a lot different style. That'll do it on my first modification on this little chassis. I think the next modification I'm going to be doing is the link mounts. These upper link mounts are just the wrong size. They're 2 inch, not 2 5/8, and then I'm going to need a 3/4 inch hole. It's a real shame. These are real pretty brackets, but off they come, I guess. Anyway, I just wanted to do a side-by-side comparison. This is what the chassis builder designed and recommended for the upper link mounts. And this is what's on the lower link mounts. This is what I wanted on the upper link mounts and lower link mounts. And that's why I'm going to heavily modify the upper link mounts at this point. Thanks again for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. I really do appreciate it. I've got a lot of other stuff going on in the shop right now, not just this new buggy build, so keep your eye out for some differential work. I got a Turbo 400 transmission build. I've got a bunch of stuff I'm doing on this buggy I'm helping build out for a guy, and a lot of other stuff coming up. So again, thanks for watching, and see you next time.